Mm. I continue as a good man.
Yeah.
Just at the beginning of chapter 21, the chapter is called Beyond the Lower East Side. I start from the beginning of the chapter. So, this next section is kind of continuation of that. Hare Krishna was becoming popular. This is in New York, 66. Regular kirtans in the park, newspaper coverage. Hayagriva called it the Hare Krishna explosion. The Lower East Side hippies considered the chanting of Hare Krishna one of the grooviest things happening. And that the Swami's disciples didn't take LSD didn't seem to affect their popularity. The devotees were accepted as angelic people, carrying the peaceful chanting to others and offering free food and a free place to stay. You could get the most interesting vegetarian food free at their place if you went at the right time. And in their storefront, on the shelf by the door, were books from India. In the clubs, local musicians played the melody that they had picked up from the Swami when he chanted in the park and at the temple. The Lower East Side was a neighborhood of artists and musicians, and now it was also the neighborhood of Hare Krishna. Bertrand Green, this is a quote, musicians were influenced by it, the Krishna chant, Govinda Jaya Jaya and other chants. I used some of those chants when I recorded. A lot of musicians reached out for this in different ways. We would explode in a short time and blow off, but then keep that chant underneath as the basis. A lot of people found that spiritual vibration even in the midst of the heavy music they were doing. They were becoming devotee musicians. Evening kirtans were always big. Brahmananda used to stand by the back door every night and watch the room fill up until there was no place left to sit. There was a lot of interest in the group chanting and music making, but after the kirtan, when the talk was to begin, people would start to leave. It was not uncommon for half the audience to leave before the talk began. Sometimes people would leave in the middle of the lecture. Very rude, but they were hippies. I once attended for a short time in Norway, a university introductory course philosophy, and the professor said he, I think at the beginning of the first lecture, he said, and if you want to see how nasty I can get, then you just get up and leave in the middle of my lecture. He didn't appreciate it either. Not the thing to do, but they didn't care. Even in Srila Prabhupada's, when he was giving lecture, they would do that. Later that was, of course, unthinkable that devotees would do that. But here in the beginning, Prabhupada had to tolerate a lot of things. One evening, Allen Ginsberg brought Ed Sanders and Tuli Kupferberg of the Fogs for the meeting. It's spelled F-U-G-S, but it's surely a pun.
What?
It's a pun. Pun means it's a play on words, because, you know.
Yeah.
The Fogs, a local group that had made a name for themselves, specialized in obscene lyrics. Among the popular songs of Ed Sanders were Slum Goddess of the Lower East Side, Group Grove. Grove, you know what grove is? You know, touching in a, how do you say, very suggesting way. And I Can't Get High. Ed had wild red hair and an electric red beard, and he played guitar during the kirtan. The devotees were happy to see their prestigious guests. The night of the Fogs, however, Prabhupada chose to speak on the illusion of sexual pleasure. Sex pleasure binds us to this material world, birth after birth, he said. And he quoted, as he often did, a verse of Yamun Acharya. Since I have become Krishna conscious, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it and I spit at the thought. The fox never returned. To speak ill of sexual pleasure was certainly not a strategic move for one who wanted to create followers among the Lower East Side hippies. But Prabhupada never considered changing his message. In fact, when Umapati had mentioned that Americans didn't like to hear that sex was only for conceiving children, Prabhupada had replied, I cannot change the philosophy to please the Americans. What about sex? Asked the ISKCON attorney Steve Goldsmith one evening, speaking out from the rear of the crowded room. Sex should only be with one's wife, Prabhupada said. And that is also restricted. Sex is for propagation of Krishna conscious children. My spiritual master used to say that to beget Krishna conscious children, he was prepared to have sex 100 times. Of course, that is most difficult in this age. Therefore, he remained a brahmachari. But sex is a very strong force, Mr. Goldsmith challenged. What a man feels for a woman is undeniable. Therefore, in every culture there is the institution of marriage. Prabhupada replied. You can get yourself married and live peacefully with one woman, but the wife should not be used as a machine for sense gratification. Sex should be restricted to once a month and only for the propagation of children. Hayagriva, who was seated just to Swamiji's left beside the large dangling symbol, spoke out suddenly. Only once a month? And with a touch of facetious humor, he added loudly, better to forget the whole thing. Yes, that's it. Very good boy. Swamiji laughed and others joined him. It is best not to think of it. Best just to chant Hare Krishna. And he held up his hands as if he were chanting on a strand of beads. That way he will be saved from so much botheration. Sex is like the itching sensation. That's all. And as when we scratch, it gets worse. So we should tolerate the itching and ask Krishna to help us. It is not easy. Sex is the highest pleasure in the material world, and it is also the greatest bondage. But Steve Goldsmith was shaking his head. Prabhupada looked at him smiling. There's still a problem? It's just that, well, it's been proven dangerous to repress the sex drive. There's a theory that we have wars because people are eating meat. Prabhupada interrupted. As long as people eat meat, there will be war. And if a man eats meat, he will be sure to have illicit sex also. Steve Goldsmith was an influential friend and supporter of ISKCON. But Prabhupada would not change the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to please the Americans. Hare Krishna. Sorry. So this is still a controversial subject. It's still the main hurdle, the main obstacle for spiritual seekers. Controlling the sex drive. But there's a lot of help to be had. Teachings of Srila Prabhupada, the teachings of the scriptures. Krishna also recognizes in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita that when Arjuna is asking, what is it that causes a living entity to act in so many sinful ways, even against his will? And Krishna immediately pinpoints the cause, saying it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of the mode of passion, which is later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring, sinful enemy of this world. Yeah, so that's what we are dealing with. Actually, speaking for myself, there was one thing that really convinced me that Srila Prabhupada is speaking the truth. I didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness. I'd seen devotees on a few occasions, but first contact with the philosophy was from reading Ishopanishad. That was a little book that I got as a little present when I bought a record from one devotee who is till this day my good friend, Janesva from Sweden. He sold me a record and he managed to squeeze a few extra coins out of me, and he gave me this book. And I immediately understood when I just seeing the cover that this is the answer. I've been praying to God for a while, asking for a sign, and I realized this must be God's answer to my question. Very eagerly started to read the book. It was very hard for me to understand. I was reading very slowly and thinking very much about it. And it came to a point where it was mentioned that one should control, one should restrict one's sex life. I was so impressed. I thought, wow, this is the first time I heard somebody who dares to say that. This must be an honest person. He's certainly not out to get followers. It's not the thing you say if you want to become popular, get a lot of disciples. So I immediately thought, yes, wow, this is the real thing. Because I was struggling with myself with this, because I didn't like this, this modern uncontrolled, completely just. I mean, I'm from Denmark, if you know anything about. It's like a pioneer country. It was the first country in the world where, same-sex marriages were legalized. It was the first country in the world that dropped all, legal restrictions on pornography. So it's not a nice background to have. But I didn't like it so much. I felt there was, but I didn't find anybody I could talk with about these things. Nobody, shared my apprehension when it came to just unrestricted sense gratification. Even my own brother, I mentioned to him once that I don't like these girls, who are just, available for one night and then, just a quick fix, and then next night somebody else. And even my own brother, he said, "Come on, that's how it should be." I mean, he had his first, experience when he was only 14 years old. So you can imagine. And I was just, even if we are twins, but I was, even to this day, I'm just, in that regard. Even I was married, we never had children. Actually, there was Bharata, who's now taking birth again as a son in Maharaj's, one of his disciples. It seems like he told me once when I said this, he said, "Wow, you've been married for 10 years and you don't have any children. You are a real brahmachari." So that was Bharata. Anyway, so I really appreciated that Prabhupada. He dared to say, later on in retrospect, I just out of curiosity, I was looking through the Ishopanishad again to see, what was it that, what is actually said there about, controlling the sex urge. And it struck me that it's so little. If you compare what is there in other places in Prabhupada's books, it's only mentioned in passing. It's not something that he, delves into. But still, with that background I had, from my perspective, I really noticed it, and for me, I was so happy to find, somebody who dared to say the truth, and that was Prabhupada's great integrity. He was not a professional Bhagavatam reciter, professional, what Prabhupada calls the professional reciters. They certainly do a very good job. Once I had occasion to actually experience, get a little experience of a professional Bhagavatam recital. We were doing Parikrama in Darwin with one friend, and we were passing by some ashram, and there was some music coming out, and there was a sign over the door. It was obvious there was a festival going on there. Couldn't read Hindi, so. But anyway, my friend, Krishna Das, from Holland, he said, let's go inside and check it out, see what's going on there. So we went inside, and I could understand that there was, one of these famous Bhagavatam recitals. And I didn't understand because it was in Hindi, but it was certainly very well done. I could appreciate it was so well done. It was very beautiful, and the way he was speaking, it was so much bhav, so much practically with tears in the eyes, and he was really, bringing up the emotions, and it was like interspersed with beautiful, bhajans, and then he would continue to speak, and Krishna, the gopis, and then, like this, and it was very well done, I have to say. But it was all actually sense gratification, in the guise of Krishna Katha. But Prabhupada wasn't like that. Although when he, just before coming to the West, he was in Juhu, actually, because that was where Sumati Muraji had she had an apartment complex there, and he was staying there. He came there just to convince her to give her a free passage to USA. So he was there for a while, and he also was giving some lectures, actually, and from the 10th canto, because there was the request of Sumati Muraji. She wanted to hear from the 10th canto. So at that time he was lecturing. But of course, without having heard those lectures, we can understand that he would certainly not just cater to her whatever sentimental attraction she had. He would still deliver the the absolute truth and explain things in the proper perspective. That Krishna's Rasa Leela is not to be imitated. Although at the same time it said there is one verse there, at the end of that section of the Bhagavad, where Sukadeva Goswami, he says that hearing about Krishna's Rasa Leela is actually the medicine for this material disease called lust. But he makes the point that is you have to hear from the right source. You have to hear from a pure devotee. So, anyway, there's a lot of to be said about this topic, but when I was in Bulgaria for the, they have Saturday programs, not Sunday programs in Sofia, and I chose to read from that part of Bhagavad Gita from the 3rd chapter, where Krishna answers Arjuna's question and explains about this formidable enemy called lust. And if you read that section, there's very good advice how to deal with this enemy that we are all fighting. It's worth studying if we actually want to become Krishna conscious and become free from material desires which are keeping us in this material world of repeated birth and death and suffering. A lot of help if we actually are sincere, we want to become happy, then all help is there. Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments?
A question about this reading of the Rasa Lila pastime. So, I have to know if the proper source means like Prabhupada's commentary or like the Krishna book.
Yeah.
Or so we can read that, but we shouldn't read the other books like from Krishna Raska Viraj Goswami, where is it depicted in more like more elaborately, or can we read also these books to decrease our lust? Or
if you read the Anjali, have you read Anjali?
yes.
It's very explicit. It's more explicit than Krishna book. Krishna is how he's, bathing with the gopis and, having amorous pastimes. So I remember reading that as a new devotee, and I was a little bewildered because I was feeling some agitation. I thought, is this for me? Should I read this? I'm not feeling that I'm becoming free from material desires. So if I think about it, then I think the conclusion has to be that we can read all of Prabhupada's books, but we shouldn't focus on things that we are not ready for. We can read through it, just then we know, what is there, and we get...
To get rid of the lust, that's the thing.
Huh?
So if we want to get rid of the lust, should we read it like continuously or often.
The 10th canto, the
Yeah.
Rasa Leela.
Yes. Or from Krishna book, because Prabhupada.
Krishna book we can read. I mean, we can read all of Prabhupada's books, but we shouldn't. Still, we shouldn't pick out, one section and just focus on that. And when we are still immature, and I think that especially goes for, these very intimate pastimes. But the statement is there that by Shukadeva Goswami, that if we hear about Krishna's Rasa Leela from a pure soul, then that is the medicine against this material disease of lust. And so, but stress has to be given to the, that we must hear from the right source. And certainly in the Krishna book especially, Prabhupada takes great pain to present it in such a way. If you read that, Prabhupada explains at great length that we should not, think that this is something of this material world. It's not something to be imitated. It is purely on the spiritual platform. So we cannot read Krishna book and make any mistakes about what is Krishna's Rasa Leela. So I personally feel very safe reading the Krishna book, and how is it that one might wonder, how is it that this will cure us from the material disease called lust? Well, Prabhupada gives a hint actually in the very beginning of the first canto, in the commentary on the lengthy purport of the first verse, because it starts out, Janma Adi Asya Yataha, the definition of the absolute truth as that from whom or from which everything emanates. And Prabhupada quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who points out that this also means that, this sex desire, it also comes from Krishna. It's there originally in God, but Prabhupada speaks about spiritual sex psychology. It's a little striking in the very beginning of Bhagavatam. But he also points out that because this has not, the nature of the absolute truth and is not been understood, therefore too much stress has been given to the perverted reflection of the material sex. So what I do experience is that by reading, about Krishna's intimate pastimes, I get a glimpse of how, what we experience in this material world is just a perversion. It's Krishna Das Kaviraj, he gives the example that love of Krishna is like gold, and material lust is the perverted reflection of love of Krishna, and it's like iron. So it's like that. When you hear about Krishna's so-called lusty affairs, you realize, wow, this is something, it's so beautiful, It's a completely different quality. Compared to that, the so-called love affairs of this material world really fades in comparison. And, so that's, I think, I started to see that. And in this way, one gradually becomes purified. And also, our fear is that if I surrender to Krishna, if I become Krishna conscious, then I'll have to give up, the real pleasure of life. I just have to say no to the senses and just perform austerity and dry up. But no, not at all. Krishna's pastimes, devotional service it is complete. We will not be lacking in any regard. The only difference is we just have to make this little adjustment, which is so difficult to make, but just to be happy that it is Krishna who's enjoying with, many beautiful girls, and not me.
Do you call that a little adjustment?
Whenever, if we ever see, some other man, from the male point of view, some other man, with many girls, just like they said about John F. Kennedy, I've heard that he used to, enjoy with many girls in his private swimming pool. He's a famous womanizer. Like me, I don't know if Clinton was more, but same category, I guess. So then we immediately become envious. Why him? Should be me there. So because we were thinking like this about Krishna, we had to come here. But if we can, just be happy that it's Krishna who is the center. It's him, like Prabhupada said to one Christian, Indian Christian man in South India once, who was, criticizing why you're worshipping an adulterer, Krishna, meaning Krishna. And Prabhupada shot back at him. He said, Krishna is not the adulterer. You are the adulterer. All women belong to Krishna. He was probably, just a very modest, conservative, living with his wife. But, if you think that your wife belongs to you, you are not. Ravindra, he was telling this, relating this, and he said, I felt a sting in my heart. Because Ravindra Swarup was, he married when he joined ISKCON, and he's still with, that's 50 years ago, he's still with the same woman, can you imagine? It's quite something.
Yes, especially for Americans.
So, but he's very frank, so he said, I felt a sting in my heart. Can't I at least have one woman? No, if you think your wife belongs to you, then you are an adulterer, because she also belongs to Krishna. That's what keeps us here, as long as we think like that. Can I at least not have one woman from... Yeah, then you have to stay here. No, she should also, Krishna should. Yeah, that's the... Anyway. That's a very, how to say, pious way of, material desire. That if we can be satisfied with one wife, it's today we have to say that's very good. But it's not good enough if you want to go back to God. You can live with a wife also, have a family, but don't think that she belongs to you. You should see that, my wife is also Krishna's servant and I am her servant. My duty is to help her to, get out of the cycle of birth and death. Anyway. So we stop here? No, okay.
Thank you very
One
much
more.
for the lecture, Prabhu. Sometimes
They all thinking, finally. Okay, I'll give a short answer this time.
It's okay, still have time.
as I live in celibacy, but sometimes I accuse myself, maybe it is the mind, that if I indulge in overeating, this is like a vent out because I'm not practicing sex, so I'm replacing it by overeating and enjoying in this way. Is it a better?
You don't look like you're overeating.
I have a strong.
You look a little better now, there's a little more. I don't think you have to worry about it. You should eat more. Certainly, if we overeat, then there will be the pushing of the tongue, belly, and genitals. But we should also be satisfied. Eating too little is also not good. Like Krishna says, you cannot be a yogi if you eat too much, eat too little, sleep too much, sleep too little.
And work too much and work too little. It's important also.
Yeah.
If you just eat and don't work.
Yeah. You can eat like an elephant if you work like an elephant. But that's again the famous balance that is so difficult to find. Why is it so difficult to find a balance in our life? Because that is mode of goodness. Too little means mode of ignorance, too much means mode of passion, but a balance, that is mode of goodness. But because goodness is so difficult to establish, to reach, therefore this is, one manifestation of that is that we tend to go to one extreme or the other. I could give countless examples of that. I think we all have experience. But we have to, it's difficult, but we have to try to find this balance. Also in eating. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
This is false advertisement. This is chocolate. But it's just water.